All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Valdy Wiederpass. I'm a volunteer, along with a couple of other people here that are helping with the technical aspects of setting this up tonight. And I serve as chair of Susquehanna Group of Sierra Club. Welcome to tonight's general membership meeting of our group, which will feature a presentation giving an overview of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy. These meetings are free and open to the public. You don't have to be a member of Sierra Club to attend, but we encourage membership as it helps us by providing funding for our activities and lets us know your contact information so we can update you on important matters. In case you didn't know, we are now in the midst of New York State's legislative session, and we are encouraging people to volunteer to help with our environmental efforts, especially with regard to legislation, policies, and local projects, such as the Move Out project. Christina Fuller is here. She's one of the leaders of that effort, and that's getting ready to collect, sort, and help distribute items that college students leave behind when they move back home. And instead of things going to landfill, these get collected, sorted out, and then made available for charitable donations in our area. That helps a huge amount in many different ways in our region. The December edition of the Susquehanna Sierra newsletter, which is our group's newsletter, was mailed out, and it's also available by from our website. If you do a search on Google with Sierra Club Susquehanna Group, you'll find our website, and then you'll be able to find previous meeting recordings, as well as previous newsletters, slides from previous presentations if the presenters provided the slides to us, and some other information too that's posted there, as well as a calendar that shows upcoming events. Our next newsletter is being worked on now. It will be coming out in March, and if you want to submit something for consideration to be published, please send it to the Sierra Club Susquehanna Group at gmail.com by Wednesday, February 26th. I want to remind people again, I've mentioned this before, but New York State is more than 3 years behind on its 2030 climate goals. That was explained in the September newsletter of our group. And it's particularly important to keep that in mind now, because the new federal administration has fired over 4,000 employees of the National Forest Service and the National Park Service. It's 10% of the Forest Service and more than 5% of the National Park Service. And these people were helping to take care of public lands. And I remind you that to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet is Sierra Club's motto. So this is particularly important to us. These dedicated employees supported the same mission that the Sierra Club has, and it's important now that more than ever for you to let your elected officials know what you think about this. And we now need even more help at the New York State level. So please call your elected officials or send them emails in both the New York State government as well as the federal level. Tell them that you want urgent action on climate change with a speedy transition to an electrified economy based on renewable energy. No new nuclear power. We do want passage of helpful legislation such as the New York Heat Act, and we want to see implementation of the Cap and Invest program this year, even though the governor has announced that she wants to delay it until at least 2026, possibly after the 2026 election. So for next month, our meeting will feature Dr. Amy Churchill, who is a BU Ecosystem Science Assistant Professor. She's going to be giving a talk on ecosystem services of northern wetlands. And again, a reminder, the event calendar is at sierraclub.org/Atlantic/Susquehanna/events. And I'm happy to now talk about tonight's presentation, which we're pleased to have Jason Shaw giving an overview of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy and their mission to conserve the lands and waters of the Southern Tier, especially for Broome and Tioga Counties, and to help preserve the natural beauty wildlife, and heritage that make our region so special. Jason Shaw is a lifelong resident of Broome County and a dedicated advocate for conservation and sustainable communities. As a Broome County Legislator representing most of Endwell and portions of Endicott, Jason has earned the Sierra Club's endorsement since 2016. In his role as president of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy, he works to protect local landscapes and natural resources. Jason also manages 2 successful businesses in Endicott, Our Country Hearts and Binghamton Yoga, reflecting his deep commitment to community and environmental stewardship. So thank you very much, Jason, for being here. I appreciate your
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thank you for being here this evening. Yeah, I've actually presented to the Sierra Club previously about the Southern Tier Land Conservancy. We started during COVID. Really, it came as a couple of friends sitting around talking about how much we love sitting around in the environment. We were having a campfire at my friend's house, and we got talking as a Broome County Legislator about what Broome County does to protect local lands. And we do have things we do. I brought things to their attention that didn't go as far as I wanted, and I felt that maybe we should form our own organization to really take this over. As we look for our slide, I mean, we've already said a lot of what I was going to say from my first slide, which is the mission of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy, which is our mission is to conserve the lands and waters of Broome and Tioga Counties to ensure the future of natural areas, heritage, and farmland practices, recreational experiences, scenic beauty, and wild spaces to further connect the people and lands of the Southern Tier. So that's what I just said. I mean, basically, we wanted to keep it very simple. We were sitting around in nature during COVID, and we loved going outside. It was one of the few things we felt we could do safely or without getting in trouble, at least. And we thought there should be more places like this. And they didn't always feel like our governments at any level, whether it be federal, state, or local, were doing everything they could. And as a legislator, one thing I've come to learn over time is that many things aren't done by government. They're done by volunteer organizations like ourselves, like Sierra Club, like Southern Tier Land Conservancy. So it grew from just 3 of us during that time. We have grown our board. So in the beginning, there were just 3 of us. We formed a 501c3, which is dedicated to serving, restoring, and protecting land in Broome and Tioga Counties. Our board is now made up of 8 volunteers. And actually, I don't think we have any trouble finding board members. What I've been really happy about is that everyone you see on here is very excited about this. And there are a lot of other people who'd like to be involved. It has been an easy thing to find people for, which isn't always easy in volunteer organizations, right? So I'm Jason Shaw. I'm the president now. I was the treasurer since the beginning, but I became so interested in our direction that I just decided to run for president, and I got elected. Jeff Merrill, who's my friend, whose house we were at when Carl and I came up with the idea, Carl Lippo being the next one. Carl, you might have seen, he's a professor at SUNY, at Binghamton University, and he was the director of the Environmental Studies Department for a while, but now he's a dean and he's an anthropology professor. Sean Cummings, who's at CCE, Dodie Jones, who is she worked in Washington for many years, and she lives locally to help her parents out, so I got her involved. Joanne Lettis, our very own, right behind the screen there, typing the buttons. Susie Ryan, who is a fellow legislator and BU lecturer. So I don't know if you've ever had Susie here, but she's great, talks about lots of different environmental issues. And then Jeremy Waddell is our latest addition. And Jeremy's very interesting because he's a member of the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. This is a great organization that's run out of Tioga County, Soil and Water District, and they are responsible for the watershed of the whole Upper Susquehanna area, which feeds the Chesapeake Water Bank. Okay, you go on to the next one. Some of our goals here are pretty obvious. I'm probably not telling you anything you didn't know, but managing and restoring wildlife habitat, biodiversity, protecting and improving water quality, conserving open space, forests, wetland habitats, to increase flood resilience, providing access to nature for all residents of the region and to foster community engagement, supporting and maintaining sustainable heritage practices such as farming, woodland, harvesting, hunting, fishing, improving climate resilience for our local communities and beyond. I mean, we tried to keep it mainstream as far as environmentalism goes. we're trying to form a Big Ten organization. I find actually that I get as many people who I would probably call conservative as a new liberal getting involved with it. Because on both ends of the spectrum, people like going outside. And they just like being part of nature, like getting your hands dirty. We were talking before the meeting started. Getting your hands in the soil feels really good. Going for a hike in an actual backwoods area feels great. So I'm happy that it's really attracting lots of different people. If you go to the next slide. Along with attracting people and having these goals, we found that there are quite a few organizations, and really Sierra Club is one of them. I don't have them on the list here, but these are some ones around town that you'll find, like Waterman Conservation was actually instrumental in the creation of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy. Chris Audette at Waterman really encouraged us to do this because his organization is currently the largest nonprofit conservation group in our county. They did not plan to be that, but they've got over 500 acres between Broome and Tioga. And he said that it is sort of a burden for them when their main focus is education regarding conservation. And they would love to have a partner like the Southern Tier Land Conservancy to hold land so that they could do their projects and programming on somebody else's land. This was also true for Cooperative Extension. Vines feels the same way. So those three were all very early on telling us we need somebody who's willing to hold land, buy land, and provide it for us to do our projects on. The other two, Upper Susquehanna Coalition, they're almost like they're a helper. They really are helping us obtain funding, to find target sites, to really, they're kind of almost a class above us. They're kind of bringing us up to their level, which I really enjoy about them. Owego Rotary gets a mention on here because they actually brought the first piece of land to us that I'll get to here in a moment. And they're a good example of a community organization who wants to put something into action, but doesn't want to own land. This is going to get a little more general here, but like why conservation? I think anybody here knows why conservation. We probably don't need to go too deep into that. What it gets me to, though, is scientists agree that we must protect at least 30% of the lands, fresh waters, and oceans by 2030 to have any chance of stemming the dual crises of biodiversity loss, climate change facing our planet. This leads right into what we were talking about previously, Waldy, which is the 30 by 30. New York State has this idea of trying to conserve 30% of New York State land and water by 2030. I suspect they're behind, but it's still a good goal, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't be working toward it. You can see here on this slide that the green areas are currently conserved land, okay, well, and waters. If you'll notice in our area, not a lot here. Now, there are other areas where there aren't a lot either, but I don't live in those places. And there's one thing I've learned is you can actually make a difference when you live there. It's very hard to make a difference when you don't live there. And we decided that we want to put some green spots on that. They might be small to begin with, but we want to get them bigger. So New York's 30 by 30 plan, it was 2022 when the legislation directed the Department of Environmental Conservation to coordinate state land acquisition plans, prioritize protection of water sources and sole source aquifers, pursue protection and restoration projects for preserving and increasing biodiversity. To reach 30%, the state has to conserve 11% more of its land and water. Because 19% is currently in conservation. To hit 30, we'd have to get 11 more percent. Now, I think this speaks to something, though, that you see locally. When I bring up the idea of conserving more land, some people say, there's already a lot of forest. Yeah, that is true. There is. That's because there's very little development here. That could change any day between fracking or people moving upstate or any other reason. We could get people coming, and solar farms are a pretty good example of it. These things come real fast and they take a lot of land. So we want to have a mechanism available to protect the best lands when they come available. And we did not have one of these. This is just another example of that. And this one just shows where some federal lands are. So, any conservation is gonna require many different levels of government and organization doing it. Many of the red ones are all private, which is really where we would end up being eventually as a private landowner, nonprofit. But so, there are reds, blues, greens, and we'd like to see a little bit more of the Southern Tier Land Conservancy in there. If you go to the next one, it says zoom in on Broome County. Broome County has a total of just over, what's it say? 700 square miles, or about 450,000 acres. We have only 33 square miles, which is 21,180 acres in parks and recreational lands. That's less than 5% of the total land area of the county that is currently truly conserved. It doesn't mean there aren't some woods and forests out there. We all know there are, but they could change any day. This is the Broome County open spaces area. And we do have a plan to try to conserve more. I just don't see a lot of action though. I see some people kind of agreeing out there. And that's why I decided that I can push only so hard as the Broome County Legislator, and Susie Ryan is right there with me. At some point, you just have to say, we're gonna have to go it alone and try to do what we can on our own. So that's why we did this. We decided to start with one of your, I think he's a member of the club, right? Who is Julian Shepherd, yes. I mean, he has done some great work over the last 30 years or so. Yeah, to come up with what are the most biologically diverse and important areas throughout Broome County. And so when we decided to start this up, we contacted him, we got basically his notebooks, and my friend Jeff, who was very good at GIS, turned it into a GIS layer so that we could figure out what his notebook meant on the actual map. Basically, there are many important places to conserve in Broome County. And we have some tools as a land conservancy to do that. We can go through land donations, land acquisitions, or conservation easements. Those I will talk about a little bit. Land donations, which is the next slide. Sorry. We can accept donations of land that meet the objectives of the STLC. So we have like a checklist.
No, I just minimized it somewhat.
Okay. So to accept land, it has to meet certain criteria. You can't just call us and say, hey, my backyard looks like a nice place. Now your backyard might be, but it needs to have it needs to hit some criteria, right? People often ask me, why would I want to do that? There are actually, aside from your own love of the land, there are donation reasons. So like you do get direct tax benefits as a donor. These donations typically include small endowment. Oh, so, right. So you, as a donor, you get tax write-off. Now, if you were to just donate land straight out, you'd probably write off most of the land within just a couple of years. There are a lot of people who've been interested in donating land in what's called a retained life estate, which means to say you and your wife, you and your kids, whatever, own a large piece of land that's quite natural. You want to stay there for the rest of your life. You can do a retained life estate, which will actually give you tax benefits while you're alive, but the land becomes owned by Southern Tier Land Conservancy when all said parties have departed, right? And we have several people looking at this. I'm certainly learning a lot about tax law and real estate. One thing about donations though is, like I have a gentleman who's looking at donating up to 500 acres, and monitoring 500 acres is going to take a lot of work. And we have to be able to do this for forever, for perpetuity, right? So, and other land trusts have told us you have to be really careful. You have to take endowments with this. You cannot just keep taking land for free. There's insurance, maintenance, there's all kinds of things. It's more expensive than you'd think to just own donated land. So every donation needs a small endowment, and endowments contribute to the initial survey, short-term and long-term legal costs, annual monitoring and management of the property. Land acquisition. This is one of the easier ones. This is one we're all kind of familiar with, which is Southern Tier Land Conservancy has a chunk of money. It goes and buys a piece of land. Now we would target things like what Julian Shepherd has in his inventory. This takes some work on our end to get grants. And there are some really great grants out there, like this community forest program run by the Forest Service offers up to $750,000. That's a lot. This kind of acquisition requires developing proposals, tying the request into state and local priorities and often requires some public access. We have found that additional funds are becoming available because of the 30 by 30 plan. In fact, we have 115 acres we're looking at that the money would actually come from Upper Susquehanna Coalition, and then they would transfer it to us. That's the hope. That was pretty neat, but we have to be able, as an owner of land, you have to be able to maintain it and insure it and all the other things. The third one's where it kind of gets complicated. Conservation easements. A lot of people come to me saying they'd like to do a conservation easement. Basically, what they're saying is, I love my land. I want it to stay completely wild for forever. Those are great laudable goals. They don't want it to cost them anything, and they want to get tax write-offs for it. This is the part that gets complicated, okay? There are a lot of state and federal tax credits for conservation easements. You get some pushback on a local level because some politicians think, oh, it's going to reduce their property taxes. We're not going to make the same amount of money. New York State actually they give you money toward your property. So the local governments are made whole, it's called. They continue to get the same amount of tax money. It is not going to reduce our taxable base. Yeah, you couldn't build another structure on the part that's conserved, but I can tell you that the property value of the things around it is about to go up. So, and we're not going to conserve, we are not looking to do a conservation easement on the green spot next to the library. These are truly like wild areas out in outlying areas where they should be. Land donations typically include, again, a small endowment. People don't seem to understand this. This is the one that I saw becoming a problem firsthand. I met a woman who owned about 30 acres of pretty nice land in Vestal, and it's got a creek running through it, nice wooded area. We went to see it. We went on our first hike and we saw a lot of hemlock trees, which was great. But they had the little white woolly adelgids on it, right? Then we came upon this field and the whole thing had turned to Japanese knotweed. So at the end of the walk, we said, hey, beautiful land. If we gave you a conservation easement on this, you realize we would ask you to clean up the Japanese knotweed, or at least try. And to do something to treat your hemlock trees, because those are really golden. Well, I wouldn't want to do that. Why not? It's natural what's happening. There's a fine line what's natural to one person versus another. I try to say, well, what's happening here is you're going to have a monoculture. You're going to lose your hemlock trees. Your Japanese knotweed's going to take over the whole darn place. And 40 years from now, it's just going to look like one big Japanese knotweed. Well, if that's what God wanted, it went down this whole weird trail. And we just decided this is not somebody we wanted to get into a conservation, even though she had great land. I wanted to fix the situation, but we don't need to get lawyers involved with that. It's just not worth our while. So it's complicated, it requires more oversight, and you have to have a relationship with the party on the other end that sees eye to eye with you. Because even if she did, what if her daughter takes it over 20 years from now and her daughter feels completely differently about it? What if she wants to go ATV racing? So if she'd say, well, they're just trails. Yeah, so then you got to get a lawyer involved. Is that just a trail? No, the one person an ATV trail is a trail, to another person a hiking trail is a trail. So we have to be very careful with conservation easements. Now I want to get into the specifics of our first land that we got. Okay, it takes a while to get the train rolling, but it seems like we're rolling now. COVID definitely had a stifling impact, but in the last few years, we had a donor come up from Owego. The Owego Rotary approached us and they said, we're wondering if you'd like to own some land for us to do some programming on. And I didn't realize it at first, but basically Adam Weitzman had been loaning them some land across from Weitzman's Metalworks or whatever it's called. And Rotary really wanted to take control of it, but the organization told them we don't want you to own land. So that's when they actually contacted Finger Lakes Land Trust, who said, go see Southern Tier Land Trust. And that's how we ended up in this. So it took about 18 months because there were no abstracts. I will give Adam Weitzman this. Whenever he got truly involved, his lawyers really jumped. But as soon as he let go, the lawyers sort of let it go. And creating abstracts from these places that are like from 1850 took a lot of time, right? So, and what's amazing about it is, it took a lot of money for what it really turned out to be. If you go to the next slide, it's a small area. It's really only 2.5 acres in 10 parcels. The advantage of it is, though, it's combined with a bunch of village FEMA properties for a total of 6.5 acres. It's just behind the Price Chopper on Main Street in Owego. It is a really nice area, and it should be floodplain. It is floodplain. The problem is there are a lot of berms, there are old foundations. There's a boat launch there. I think we took a walk there. Right?
Yes, you gave us
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
talk after the walk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a nice day. So, you know, I mean, it's a small property, it's our first one, but it's really hit with, it's a recreational area that the Rotary is managing. It's already got partners with the Rotary and with the village of Wego because of where it's setting. Upper Susquehanna had identified it as a place where they'd like to see some restoration done to make it more into an actual floodplain so water can come up and go back down. So that was our first acquisition. It was a great test case. It took about $15,000 for this tiny amount of land because of all the abstract work, surveying, and all the rest of it. And that still doesn't count some of the other stuff we have to do. We also have to buy insurance for any land we own. So that's always going to be an interesting thing to see how it goes up as we own the land.
How much is insurance for this 6.5 acres
Right.
overall?
Not a lot. The hard part is, so we had the only policy we could get started at about 750 plus a little bit. So it came out to be about 825, I think. But that's a lot for 2.5 acres. However, we can put another 100 on it and it won't increase the price of the insurance. It's kind of like the insurance broker did not want to sell a policy for less than a certain amount, I think is what it comes down to, right? So we're good for at least the next acquisition, at least. I don't know what will happen if we start getting 500 acre.
Well, that doesn't have to be contiguous?
No, and these aren't contiguous either. These are 10 parcels, several of which are kind of disparate because the village owns ones in between. Yeah,
That's good.
it is really good. Yeah, conservation is not cheap. The Canawanna land donation cost both parties a combined total of nearly $15,000. Luckily, much of this was offset with grants and donations. However, STLC has continuing annual costs in the form of insurance and monitoring. In the long run, STLC plans to build a financial trust that can help fund operations and insurance. We need financial support. So it kind of then rolls into, you know, how can you get involved? Many of you have actually been involved already. I would say the largest number of donations from outside the board have come from Sierra Club members. Okay, and we really appreciate that. But we do need supporters. We need organizations, potential landowners, and volunteers. We'd like to know what's important to you and where funding is available. There are only so many of us. One thing as the president that I've decided is that if somebody has an idea, there are a lot of ideas. Maybe I should put it, I'm sure you find this too, Baldy, as president of the Sierra Club. Ideas are cheap. Finding a leader to push that idea all the way through, that's how I became president of this group, because I decided I wanted to see Canawanna done. And I just went all out on it. It took me 18 months, but I got it done. And I thought if there's another project, I need somebody to step up to be in charge of it. So even an outsider, you don't have to be on the board. We'd love to have somebody. If you've got an idea and you want to run with it, come to us and talk to us about it. We could really use a lawyer. Probably most organizations feel this way, but we really need one because we do a lot of real estate, right? And if we drop conservation easements, we need somebody who's familiar with how you negotiate that. Like, consider the ATV trail versus pedestrian trail. I wouldn't even thought of that. But a lawyer told us about it. They said, that's how specific you have to be. Farmers, fishermen, others who have deep connections to land, folks who work for or are involved in underserved communities, all these things are good. Anybody with a potential land donation, we'd love to hear from you. We can't do everyone that comes our way. There have been a few that have come our way. We just couldn't do them. They really didn't fit the criteria. They weren't in a target area. We have to be able to substantiate it to the state government. Otherwise, we could be handing out tax breaks, basically, right? That's not what we're doing. We do allow people to get tax breaks, but only when it's truly bona fide, like important land for the environment. And of course, monetary donations. Actually, last time I was here, we got several donations on PayPal, right while we were talking. So on our website, www.southerntlc.org. And you can also email us from there. If there's a donation link on that. I do want to go back one slide though, Joanne. I just want to talk about this future opportunities. One of the reasons we did this is we thought there were some aspirational type projects out there. Like working with Waterman to take over the monitoring of the IBM Glen is something we'd really like to do. They'd like to have a local monitoring organization. They currently work with Shenango Land Trust, which is great, but Shenango Land Trust is pretty far away and they can't come down every time Waterman has a question. Working with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition on larger properties in Northern Broome, the retained life estates, we're hoping to be written into wills. And some of the other projects though are like connecting to the Finger Lakes hiking trip. That would be great, right? One of the big dreams that got us started is I was an avid hiker at Jones Park during COVID. And so was my friend Jeff. And Carl was talking about Aquaterra. And we're like, those can be connected so easily. If not by owning the land, by getting the rights to walk through it. I don't really understand why Broome County government hasn't at least approached the one company that owns most of that land to just come up with a solution year by year or something. There's one logging company that owns it, Cotton Hamlet, I think they're called. And to me, that's just the kind of thing we've managed to do with snowmobile trails. Why can't we do it for like parks like that? If you could connect those that own that land, that'd be a gorgeous big park. So those are some of the aspirational things that kind of drive me forward with it. I hope you find them exciting. I think that we're the kind of organization that can help Sierra Club realize some of its like aspirational goals on a local level. And that's kind of where I want to be. As a member of the Broome County Legislature, I have become far less political. I've become far more, before I got in there, I thought arguing about big ideas was going to get me somewhere. Then I realized that it's the details that matter. It's getting in there and actually figuring out how are we going to do the thing we're going to do. And that's why we decided to start this rather than just talk about it. So, and we'll take questions if anybody has any.
So you mentioned earlier that there's tax reductions available for people. Does that vary depending on which approach people take? And how much per acre roughly would the tax break be? And is it for both the school taxes and the Broome County and whatever the local community tax portion of that might be, like town tax or whatever?
Now, I'm not a tax lawyer. However, as I understand it, there's a couple different ways. So if it's done through donation is sort of like giving a gift, right? So you're going to get to write off some portion of your income based on what you gave away. Now, if you don't have much income, giving stuff away doesn't help you with your taxes much, right? So generally, this is kind of how it ends up helping people. People who have a lot of land to donate often have more income, right? Like I want a doctor who's looking at it. He's got a fair amount of income. So when he gives this, he's going to be able to write off a certain amount per year for a while.
And so this is for income tax write-offs?
That would be. Now that's a straight donation.
Okay.
I'm going to get to the other one. Straight donations are done like he was giving away money, right? Like you'd write it off your taxes, but you can only do a certain amount per year. There's a calculation that the IRS has. It's also true that if you do a retained life estate, so in a situation where say somebody is 68, you have to go to the actuarial tables. You have to say, what is the expected lifespan? And then you kind of calculate per year how much they can write off. So that's another way of doing it. It's different when they just flat out give you 100 acres and it's got a value of $100,000. You can write up to a certain portion off right away. And maybe carry it for a few years. But when it's a retained life estate, it has to be based on actuarial tables. And that's the income tax. Now, when it comes to conservation easement, that's different. Because if you were the one going, if you had just given us the land, then you get the write-off. Now, if you had continued to own the land and we put a conservation easement on it, you're giving up your development rights. You're essentially taking away some of the value, some of the economic value of the land to create environmental value for the land, right? So New York State does give you an annual tax incentive to do that. It's based on your property taxes. Exactly how it's calculated, I can't tell. But I do know they end up making state governments or local governments whole. this is one of the big, as a legislator, I often hear from the others, well, I don't need to reduce the amount of money we're getting. This will not do that. New York State will provide you, maybe they pay directly to the county. I don't really know how they do it. I do think it covers both local taxes and school taxes, though I'm, like I said, I'm not a lawyer and we haven't done this yet. Because it's the most complicated one. And it might depend on certain factors. So this is where we could really use a lawyer. Okay, because this one is the one that the Finger Lakes Land Trust, which is the largest land trust in New York State, told us be very careful. It's very legally intensive and you really want to have a lawyer on your board by the time you do it.
So you don't have a lawyer now?
No.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a big time commitment. It's very rare that anything really comes up, but right now ChatGPT is as close as I get, right? And so what I do is I give it documents from other land trusts and I say, how would this apply to us? It is very helpful in that way. But I wouldn't want to stake, a future decision on just what it points us in the right direction. But when it comes to making a decision, we've got to have an actual lawyer.
I think we have a question on,
Yes. Someone asked, so if you conserve a big piece of land, is the main purpose of that to turn it into a park for public access?
If you conserve a large piece of land, is the main purpose of that to turn it into public access? It would depend on the piece of land, I think. There was one piece of land early on that I still kick myself that we were not yet big enough. I don't even think we're big enough now, which is the Tuscarora Boy Scout camp, right? So they came to us, so Finger Lakes Land Trust contacted us and said, could you do this? We didn't own any land at the time. And as much as we wanted to, truthfully, we were not ready. We could not have done. But I would love to be in a position to protect a piece of land like that. And I think something like that would have immediately become open to the public because there were already trails. It's on the map. Canawanna Nature Preserve, which is only a few acres, is public access. Now, we've had other people approach us where a piece of land is landlocked. And yeah, we could probably get an easement. We're going to require one to go in and out. But sometimes people in their donations don't want it to be, they want it to remain more wild than that. We'd have to talk that over. Because when somebody comes to you and they're bequeathing land to you in their will or whatever else, they usually have some desires that go with it. We want to be very respectful of whatever that desire is. We have to weigh that against our mission. Our mission being public access, but also preservation. And some places might not be as easy to open up, and it might be risky and hard to do, costly. So we have to weigh it. I think that in a perfect world, they would all be open. So that is truly, it's in our mission to try to make them open, but I don't think we could say 100% every one of them is going to be completely open. Again, with a woman with the conservation easement in Vestal on 30 acres, Carl, the professor, said, what if I asked you if I could bring up students? Oh, no. We kind of knew she was right out because it was really close to BU. It would be a great environment for the kids to go up and see what woolly adelgid looks like and how they're treating it and stuff like that. That was right out of the picture. When she said no public access like that, we thought this is not what we want. So I think all the board members would like public access, but I don't want to tie our hands in the case that somebody comes to us with 500 acres and they just want it kept private. We would certainly consider what they're saying and why they're saying, right?
Yeah, and like you said, for liability reasons and safety reasons too, suppose it has some really dangerous, like really steep gorge or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
And then you're worried about, is somebody gonna fall and end up being crippled? And maybe they sue your organization saying, well,
Right.
you should have had warning signs, or you should
Right.
have had railings or whatever.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're suing you, and maybe there's a judgment that wipes out your entire thing, and now you
You
have
got
to sell off all your.
Yep.
And you still can't.
Yep, and we're back at square one.
Yeah.
And that is exactly, one of the pieces of land we're looking at has a small dam on it. I think it's called a Class A, which I think is actually better than B or C. And the problem is it's gonna require maintenance and stuff, so we're trying to figure out how do we handle having a very small dam, and I don't really understand how dangerous that is. So we're talking to engineers and stuff about that. Each piece of land comes with its own history and positives and negatives, right? But it creates an amazing weapon. So when we walk down into this, like machete style hike, right? You walk down and all of a sudden it just opens up like the Blue Lagoon or something. Like, it's just gorgeous, right? And you knew at that moment, we gotta get this piece of land. I don't exactly know what it means to have this dam, but damn, we need this. Right?
And if you do get washed out in
Right.
a torrential downpour, this
Exactly.
happened in, northern part of Endwell, there was a flood, control small dam. I forgot what the name of this place was, but it ended up washing out part of the road and then flooding some people that were, in the neighborhood.
Right.
The elementary school area,
Yeah.
the main part of main Endwell school district.
So that's one of the things, the classification of the dam has something to do with the possible danger to outsiders. And A is like little to none. That's our hope. But yeah, so if there was anywhere near houses that would be of class B or even C, which is probably like mass mayhem, right?
What's the purpose of that dam?
It was to control, yeah, they want to have a certain amount of water left behind. There's a divot in it. So that some of the water flows out, and some of it stays. And it backs up and it creates this really beautiful weather. So I think the purpose is to create a
To create the artificial.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not real deep. I mean, I think that the dam is really only, say, 3 feet tall and maybe 12 feet wide, with this divot in the center that's like maybe 1 foot deep cut out, and so it flows over, but it gets dammed up, right? So the dam gets extra dammed, and somebody's got to go in and clear it. So we kind of have to find an organization that's willing, has the resources to go in there with some small bobcat or something to pull those things out, because we're never gonna.
You have another comment on
Okay.
Zoom. She was thinking of wetlands where the public could actually drown in a pond or try to kayak where they should not.
Yeah, I think that's great. So that's exactly the kind of problem we worry about, is somebody kayaking where it's really not a great idea, or swimming where it's not a great idea. Yeah, like I know Broome County puts up signs. We have Hawkins Pond, which you probably are familiar with. And that's a no swimming pond. And I have gotten constituent complaints. People say it's perfectly safe. I want to swim in it. I have swum in it. Why is there a sign saying I shouldn't? Because we don't have a lifeguard. And while you might be fine, we cannot just open it up to anybody who goes in there. It'd be fiduciarily irresponsible of the county to not put up those signs and not try to prevent people from swimming. So I think the same thing would go for us. I mean, I'm an outdoorsy person, but I actually run businesses and I'm more of an indoorsy person when it comes to that. And I understand liability, and I know that probably my greatest strength in this is the ability to own the land and come up with hopefully the financial wherewithal to make it last. That's what I'm trying to do, so that we can all then go out and enjoy these areas.
That's a good comment. That reminds me that, my former workplace was GE.
Yeah.
And the GE Athletic Association, which really became just a social organization after a while, they owned property up, off of Route 26 on the way to, what is it, Greenwood Park.
Oh, yeah.
So it was on, maybe the side branch on the way to Greenwood Park,
Yeah.
that road, I can't remember exactly where it was now, but somebody swam in there and drowned. So they ended up having to sell off the property because,
Too much liability.
yeah, if it happens again, you know, that could be the end of it.
Yeah.
And, so that was, I remember, a big controversy and a big tragedy. It was like, it has nothing to do with the organization,
No,
but it was just somebody
right.
ended up fooling around. He might have been drinking or
Yep.
who knows, I don't remember the circumstances, but
Right.
something happened and, but yeah, that's a real, thing to worry about.
Yep, and that's why we have like an umbrella policy for the group to try to protect us if there's a bad decision or something like that. But you can buy as much insurance as you want, believe me. And they'll sell you any amount of insurance. I'm not sure how much we need, but we certainly carry several $1 million right now. And I'd like to actually expand some of what it is, but it's gonna cost thousands of dollars a year. How much carrying costs can we have on an annual basis? Right now, we're looking at about $2,000, I think, in annual expenses between insurance, being a member of the LTA, which is the Land Trust Alliance, licensing our GIS software, having a post office box, having a safe deposit box. Like before you know it, you're at $2,000. think we're maybe 1650, but I'm just saying it will be 2,000 before we know it. We got to be able to raise $2,000 a year to handle all that. So either we need to come up with a financial trust that pays dividends of $2,000 a year, and that's a lot of money. That's $100,000, right? No, $40,000, 2%. It's a lot of money. We don't have that amount of money right now. Yes, well, they're right in front, yes. We'd be happy to take a check or cash or both.
But, I mean, there are some big foundations.
Yeah.
Are you applying to some of them
Yeah.
potentially? Or-
But, we are definitely constantly looking for grant money to do things.
Okay.
And I would really love to find somebody who's interested in helping with an endowment. And maybe as we get some more land under management and we prove that we can do it, I do think there are some local sponsors who might consider doing such a thing if we have a good long-term vision and can prove it's working.
How about any support from Broome County or any of the other local governments? Is anybody at least giving you suggestions or help in some way, or helping to publicize your efforts, or even discussing it maybe at the Broome County Legislature meetings?
Well, I will say the both land banks in both Broome and Tioga counties are aware of us and have steered people towards us, which is very good. Both planning departments are aware of us, and I think they think we're doing a good thing here. And they will continue to send people our way. There has been no real financial support from any of them, though I would consider a small community fund grant from Broome County. We were denied it the first time around. Broome County owns several pieces of land that are undevelopable, and I don't really know what it plans to do with it. We thought, well, maybe these would be a great couple of first properties. That never went anywhere, and I just got the hint that maybe we'd be better just going at it ourselves, right? Tioga County's been pretty supportive down there, and believe me, we got plenty of supporters in Broome County, and I think in time, when we prove our mission, I think Broome County government will be there. It's just, we're too small, I think, at the moment for them to really register it, you know? The EMC has been very supportive, and that's a Broome County organization.
That's good.
Anyone else?
Two more questions in the chat.
All right.
First is, would it be better for someone to offer land to the state to acquire? Or is that only available in the Adirondacks?
Right, so somebody's asking, would it be better for someone to offer land to New York State to buy? And they're wondering, is that available around here, basically? My experience is that they are mostly interested in add-ons to existing pieces of land. So if you were right near one of their parks or or one of their forests, right, they might consider buying it right from you. They might, however, though, send you to an ancillary or an auxiliary organization like our own, because one of our own criteria is how close is it to other large conserved pieces of land. So if you owned 3 acres in the middle of Endwell and asked us to conserve it, we probably wouldn't be interested. However, if you own 3 acres next to Jones Park or Oakley's Corners, anything like that, we'd probably be very interested because we know we're anchored to a large piece of land. There are definitely bad stories from other land trusts about obtaining a small but nice piece of land that later becomes pretty much a desert because people fill in all around it and it no longer has a water supply. It no longer attracts wildlife, whatever the problem is. Finger Lakes Land Trust told us, do not take too small a piece of land if it's not connected to something else wild, basically. So they have 26,000 acres under conservation, and they've got 12 full-time employees. They know what they're doing. So when they tell us, like, to be careful about certain things, we listen to them. And what's the other question?
The next question was, have you looked into getting support from the Nature Conservancy? I think they do similar work buying and managing big chunks of forested land.
Yeah, so Nature Conservancy, I mean, that's the major leagues. So between the Land Trust Alliance, the Nature Conservancy, those are like your Yankees and Mets. We're like the Rumble Ponies. Okay, maybe even lower at the moment. But we're trying to become Rumble Ponies. You know, there's definitely tiers. Finger Lakes Land Trust is probably like a AAA ball, right? You know, if you want to use that analogy, they're far beyond us. But they're who we're looking up to, and they're who we ask questions to. So yeah, I mean, we read their stuff just like you do, and if something were to come around that we could apply for or work with them on, we certainly would. But we're pretty small. Until we acquire more land, I don't know if they'd even really notice us. However, I will say that Land Trust Alliance usually tells people, don't start a land trust, is what they told us. They do not. There are enough of them already. But when we contacted them about our idea, they looked at that map that I showed you and they said, yeah, you should start a land trust. Because nobody's doing anything there. I was really annoyed as a Broome County Legislator. I went to our planning department and asked for our list of like state level initiatives for conservation in our area. We didn't even submit any. Now, I know, and in their defense, they said as well, it's hard to stand up against things like the Finger Lakes or Watkins Glen. Yeah, it is, but look around. There are things worth conserving here. And if we don't believe it, why are they gonna believe it? That we've got to start believing in ourselves. That's kind of what's going on here. We've given ourselves a bad rap ever since the end of IBM. I think it's going back for quite a while now. It's time to just like live in the now, enjoy what we've got, and be proud of it, and ask for conservation here. We might not be the Catskills, but I don't live in the Catskills. I know there's good stuff here, and you do too. So talk to your legislators about it. I will say, you guys are great at endorsing legislators, but I don't think we hear enough from either Sierra Club or anyone else about what their local priorities are. Yeah, you can talk to me till you're blue in the face about like national level stuff. We can't control that. We would love to hear some specific examples of things you'd like done locally. Then you might actually see somebody bring it up at a meeting. But they can't bring up like a huge national. If they do, it just ends up becoming a debate over nothing we can handle. So, yeah, okay. I think I overreacted. Yes, in the back. If for those of you at home, there are so many people here. You should have seen them. They're in the back.
Yeah, so for the bits of land that can't be accessed, what is the consideration for carbon credits? Is that too difficult, worth the effort?
We haven't thought about it directly in carbon credits. I don't know how I'd have to know more about how that would work.
I don't know how they work or if they're still a thing.
Yeah, if you wanted to come on board and figure out the carbon credit thing, Josh, we would love to have.
Oh, I have so many ideas. So many.
Yeah, so I mean, ideas are great, and anybody who really has one that they want to run with, we will happily listen to you. I mean, we don't have all the answers. We just happen to have done the paperwork that got us 501(c)(3), right? And now we have a bank account, and now we own some land, and we want to own more land, and we want to do right by the local community, and we're made up by people like you, right? One of the reasons we asked Joanne to be on it is I wanted to have a direct tie to your group. That's why we have somebody from CCE on it who also helps form vines. And I often talk to watermen. I mean, I'm really trying to and we have a non-board member at the Owego Rotary who's our liaison. Like, we want input from local groups. Otherwise, we really won't know what the next best thing to work on is.
Yeah, and like you were saying, believing in ourselves, there are reasons to believe in ourselves. Things that you might not think about, but something as even a small wetland that's perhaps 5 acres or something like that can be a very important flyover stop for migrating waterfowl.
Yep.
Or a fishing spot for osprey or even bald eagles.
Yeah.
Tree swallows will be catching insects, during the summertime to feed their young and raise their families. So all of this stuff is important, and a beaver might move in and they might raise a family, and then they might even expand the wetland. So all of these things can help, and it's good for children too if they have access to it, that they can learn about what's going on, and hopefully join groups like yours and ours in the future to help us out.
Yeah, Sierra Club has been the most supportive group, again, I'm just gonna say, as a local community-based group. And then it comes like Owego Rotary, and then these organizations like CCE, Vines, and Watermen, who are like existing organizations themselves, they've all been great. There is a lot There are a lot of people who support us. It just takes time to get it rolling, and you see it, exactly what Wally just said. No, those pieces too small. It just has to work into a plan that can be financially viable for our organization to handle it. So it stinks when you tell somebody that, "Hey, I don't think we can do this one," but you could donate the land and we could sell it and buy other land. And that's another way of going. People have said, "Hey, I'd love to contribute my land," and we're like, "Well, it's not the land that we want to save." Well, we could sell it and buy other land, and vacant land's not that expensive, right? And we could hopefully add on to parcels we already own and begin to expand them. We'd like to make more contiguous large areas.
There's probably less benefit for you though, because there's work involved in the legal aspect and.
There's a lot of money in lawyers, you know who always makes the money on this stuff.
Yeah, and then maybe the tax breaks
Yeah.
for that donated piece of land that's not going to conservation probably aren't there either, so temporarily. maybe-
No, as long as they contribute to the STLC, they would get a write-off no matter what.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So maybe it's not, maybe it's,
Right.
better than I thought then.
It would be, yeah, it would, as long as you can afford it, we're not asking anybody to do
Yeah.
anything they can't
So
afford.
what about this woman that had the 30 acres, would she?
She only wanted a conservation
She
easement.
just wanted an easement, okay, so anybody else that is maybe iffy and maybe could they write it into their will, that's a donation?
We have one who, that's the angle it went, I haven't heard anything
Okay.
since. But I think it's a hard thing to conceive, and it may take a while, somebody's thinking about their will. It's hard to think about your own death,
Yeah,
right? So we have to also get better
Not
at
when you're
talking
80.
about it. But that,
Not when you're 80.
I don't know, at any age, it's hard to conceive of your own passing away, right? So we gotta be sympathetic about what's going on in their brains about it, right?
yeah,
I don't know, it would be great to meet somebody who was an estate lawyer, who's talked to many people about what their plans are for the future. That's not my forte, right? But I'm getting better at it because I realize this is a sensitive issue.
Yeah.
Right?
it might be worth it to put onto your website for people to consider that, especially if they don't have children.
Right.
Or their children are estranged and.
Or
they're not
left
really
the
well-
area.
Or maybe the
Yep.
children have no interest in coming back at all,
Yep.
ever, and they don't wanna be hassled with trying to buy and sell properties.
Right.
It's got-
You have to think, if you get somebody who's well into their 80s, their kids could easily be in their 60s, right?
Yeah.
So those people may not want to, they may live in Colorado. They probably don't want anything to do with 50 acres back in Susquehanna or whatever, right? So they may just say, you know what, Dad, Mom, do with it what you want. We don't need the money. Our kids are grown off anyway, so don't worry about us. And that seems to be the person who's coming to us, who's old enough that their oldest children are not looking for the money. So that's good. In this way, it does again kind of go to the people who have the money and resources, but we're trying to hold them for everyone to use, right? To get them out of just a couple hands and into everybody.
I wish there was a source of public money that was more easily accessible, because this deserves to happen. And the state is looking, like you said, at more of its own large famous parks to
Yeah.
add on to them and fill in holes that, they're still have gaps in them, but
Yeah, I feel we really
communities
get,
like ours are like being left out of that.
if our local governments don't compete for some of the money that's available, we're not gonna get it, right? The only other way to do it is to go through organizations like our own, and us, Upper Susquehanna Coalition is a gateway to some of that money. It is a coalition of like maybe 18 different soil and water districts in the Upper Susquehanna area who've combined to try to preserve water quality and stuff like that. So they're looking to work with small land trusts in the area to buy the land but not own it, to give it to the land trust. They'll upgrade the land. Like in Owego, they take out some of the berms and the foundations and they turn it back into more of a natural area, which I think would be really good for everybody.
So, sorry, it's another idea, but.
Yeah.
Maybe for your website, if you put something out there that helps farmers and makes them think about this too, they might have non-productive land.
Yeah.
That might be worth preserving, and yet they're paying taxes on it.
Yeah.
And maybe they wanna be able to get a tax break, and so this could help them in the long run too, and maybe they don't wanna see it be, being turned into a suburb of, 5-acre lots or something, and people out there don't wanna see that happen.
You've hit on a really important one, which is farmland in this area is laying fallow at an increasingly large rate. And They still get ag district, tax breaks, a lot of them, but there's a real problem where there's a lot of empty farmland. I think the number of farmers under 30 versus those over 60 is like 10-1 in Broome County. And we do have immigrants who come to town who know how to farm, but they don't have money and they don't have land, and they've never farmed in this climate. One of our aspirational goals, and Vines was completely on board with this, as was CCE, is you could get enough land to make incubator farms. So like a community garden, so I kind of got involved when in 2015, I had to work on getting rid of a building in Endwell. And you needed to come up with an idea of what to put there in order to get the grant. I went to Vines because I volunteered with them on it. And they said, we'd love to put a community garden in. And so that ended up getting me $250,000 to take down a building and put up a community garden. And it began to make me realize, like, this is great if you want a 4x8 plot, but there's gotta be something more than that, right? But there's a real disconnect between the 4x8 to like 100 acres. Who is going to handle just a couple acre farm for somebody who doesn't have equipment or land? They could be great for us because agriculture is such a big part of local economy. Why aren't we trying to get these immigrants or anybody who knows how to do it? But really, we do have a lot of people from Central and South America who know how to farm. So that's an aspirational goal we have. It could take decades.
Yeah.
I would, but believe me, there are people who totally agree with us who are in some form of structure at like CCE and Vines and would love to do it. Have we reached our time limit?
We do have
Two more, check.
questions,
Okay,
if you're
well,
up for it. The first one is, do you work with towns to help monitor their parks?
Do we work with towns to help monitor parks? No. So, I mean, I go to parks as a Broome County Legislator, I sometimes monitor them, but, we would happily try to find land near a park and add it on. And in some cases, like the question was before from whoever said it, we might end up giving it to the town if they take it. Or to the state if they take it. Because we don't necessarily have to continue to own every piece of land. We're not trying to gobble it up. Our goal is conservation. If we can get somebody else to conserve the land, we're happy with that too. But not directly. In certain circumstances, we might work with the town. It hasn't really come up yet though.
And then the second question is, since land is so fragmented, how about focusing on old farms that might
Yeah.
still have over 100
Right, so
acres?
since land is so fragmented, why not focus on some larger old farms? And believe me, we are. The piece of land I'm talking about in, that's under consideration now is over 100 acres and it is an old farm. And I think it was probably their old pond that got turned into a dammed up spot to create this wetland. I don't exactly know how it got to be how it is. All I know is it's beautiful and it was farmland. And so, and there are other ones nearby. It would be amazing to just keep adding on. And these are people who are in their 80s who basically just want to do right by the land. I can't say they were activists in any way. They just loved their land and realized it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. So again, if anybody has any ideas, and especially if you want to make a donation, please look up the Southern Tier Land Conservancy's website and donate to them. It would really help a lot. Jason, obviously, you can tell by his enthusiasm and his dedication, he cares deeply about this. So please help out in any way you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.